My name is James Anthony Miller, and I'm here to share a story that changed my life in ways I could have never imagined. It's not the kind of story you expect to live through, much less tell the world, but it's one that I feel compelled to share. This is a story of how a routine hospital visit became a journey to the afterlife, a journey where I met Jesus Christ and experienced the reality of heaven. Back then, I was living in Portland, Oregon with my wife, Emily, and our 2 children. Life was busy but good. I worked as a counselor for the Juvenile Probation Department in Multnomah County, and it was more than just a job for me. It was my calling. Every day, I worked with teenagers who were going through some of the hardest challenges of their lives. I saw potential in every one of them, even when they couldn't see it in themselves. Helping these kids gave my life meaning. I used to joke with my colleagues, "I'll do this job until the day I die." I didn't think much of those words at the time, but looking back, they carried a weight I couldn't have understood then. It all started on a beautiful spring day, May 3rd, 2007 to be exact. I remember that morning vividly. The sun was shining, and the air had that perfect balance of coolness and warmth that you only get during spring in Oregon. The cherry blossoms were in full bloom, lining the streets with soft pink petals, and I remember thinking how beautiful everything looked. I had breakfast with Emily that morning while the kids were getting ready for school. It was one of those mornings where everything felt just normal. There was no indication that my life was about to take a dramatic turn. After breakfast, I headed to work like I always did. The day was packed with meetings and case reviews, but I didn't mind. I enjoyed the busyness of it all. I thrived on helping these kids find hope and a future. But by the afternoon, something didn't feel right. It started as a dull ache in my lower back. At first, I thought it was just from sitting at my desk too long. You know how it is. You ignore it, thinking it's nothing. But the ache didn't go away. It got sharper, more intense, and I started to feel it radiating down my side. That's when I knew exactly what it was: a kidney stone. I'd had kidney stones before, so I recognized the pain immediately. If you've ever had one, you know it's not something you forget. It's sharp, relentless, and feels like your body is fighting against itself. I thought to myself, all right, here we go again. I figured I'd ride it out like I had in the past. Drink some water, endure the pain, and wait for it to pass. But this time, it didn't pass. The pain got worse, much worse. By the evening, it was clear that this wasn't like the other times. The pain was unbearable, and I could barely stand. Emily noticed right away that something was wrong. She's always been the type to trust her instincts, and she said, "James, you need to go to the hospital. This isn't normal." At first, I resisted. I thought, it's just a kidney stone. I'll be fine. But deep down, I knew she was right. This wasn't something I could handle on my own. So I agreed, and she drove me to the emergency room. I remember sitting in the car, clutching my side, trying to stay calm. The drive felt like it took forever, even though it was only about 15 minutes. When we got to the ER, I tried to play it cool. I walked up to the front desk and told the nurse, "I've got a kidney stone. It's on the left side." They checked me in quickly, and I expected it to be a routine visit. In my mind, I thought, they'll give me some morphine, maybe in 4, and I'll be back home by morning. But things didn't go as planned. After running some tests, the doctor came back with unexpected news. Not only did I have a kidney stone, but I also had a kidney infection. That was a curveball I wasn't expecting. They started me on antibiotics right away and decided to admit me overnight for observation. The plan was to break up the stone the next morning using a routine procedure. I wasn't worried. I trusted the medical team, and I figured this was just a minor setback. Emily stayed with me until visiting hours were over, and I told her, "Don't worry, I'll be fine. Go home, get some rest, and I'll see you tomorrow." The procedure went as planned. The doctors used a common technique to break up the kidney stone, and I remember feeling relieved that the worst was over. But what none of us knew was that the antibiotics they'd given me weren't working. When the stone was broken up, the infection spread into my bloodstream, triggering a condition called sepsis. My organs began shutting down one by one, my heart, my lungs, and everything else. I remember lying in the hospital bed, feeling weaker with each passing moment. It was like my body was slipping away from me, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. As my body failed, I realized what was happening. I was dying. It's a strange thing to come to terms with, and you'd think it would be terrifying. But the truth is, I wasn't afraid. In that moment, a sense of peace washed over me. It was a peace I can't fully describe, like a warm embrace, a reassurance that everything was going to be okay. All I could think was, I'm going home. What happened next is something I'll never forget for the rest of my life. One moment, I was lying in that hospital bed, barely holding on, and the next, it was like I had been released. My spirit left my body so suddenly, but it wasn't scary. It was almost effortless. I could see myself lying there on the bed, surrounded by doctors and nurses rushing to stabilize me. I could hear the beeping of the machines and the voices of the staff, but all felt distant, like it was part of a different world. And then everything started to fade. It was as if I was being drawn upward, through the hospital ceiling, through the floors, and higher into the sky. It all happened so quickly, faster than I could comprehend. The experience reminded me of a verse from the Bible. To be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. That's exactly how it felt. 1 second, I was in that hospital bed, and the next, I was somewhere else entirely. As I rose higher and higher, I felt this incredible sense of freedom. There was no pain, no heaviness, only peace. I remember looking around as I traveled, and it felt like I was passing through layers of existence. I went through the clouds, into the blue sky and beyond. Soon, it was as if I was no longer in the Earth's atmosphere. I was surrounded by darkness, but it wasn't an empty or scary darkness. It felt vast and infinite, like I was moving through the very fabric of creation itself. And then, in the distance, I saw it. It wasn't the classic tunnel of light that you hear about in other near-death experiences. For me, it looked more like a glowing window, a gateway into something greater. The light pouring out from it wasn't just bright. It was alive. It was warm, inviting, and filled with a love so pure that I felt drawn to it with every fiber of my being. When I passed through that glowing window, everything changed. I wish I had the words to fully describe what it was like, but there are no words in our language that can capture the beauty and perfection of heaven. The first thing I noticed was a peace. It was a kind of peace I'd never experienced on earth. Pure, unshakable, and absolute. There was no fear, no worry, no pain. It was like every burden I'd ever carried had been lifted, and I was finally free. I looked around, and everything was alive. The trees, the grass, the flowers. They weren't just existing. They were vibrant and full of life. It felt like even the air was alive, humming with a sense of joy and purpose. And the most incredible thing, everything welcomed me. I know that might sound strange, but it's true. I could feel the trees welcoming me. The flowers seemed to rejoice in my presence. It was as if all of heaven was celebrating that I was there. For the first time in my existence, I felt like I truly belonged. On earth, Even in the best moments of my life, there was always a subtle sense of something missing, a feeling that I didn't quite fit. But here in heaven, I felt complete. I realized that this was my true home. This was where I was meant to be all along. As I took it all in, one thought rose above everything else. I wanted to see Jesus. More than anything, I wanted to be in his presence. It wasn't just curiosity. It was a longing so deep that it consumed me. I knew, without a doubt, that Jesus was there, and I couldn't wait to meet him face to face. I began walking through what looked like a beautiful forest. The trees were tall and majestic, their leaves shimmering with a light that seemed to come from within. I could feel that Jesus was on the other side of those trees, and every step I took brought me closer to him. As I walked, something incredible happened. The trees began to part in front of me, almost as if they were bowing in reverence. It felt like they were saying, "He's going to see the king. He's going to see the king." When I stepped out into the clearing, I saw him. Jesus was standing in the distance, surrounded by a multitude of angels and what I call the redeemed, people who had once lived on earth and were now in heaven. The moment I saw him, my heart felt like it was going to burst. He was more glorious than anything I could have ever imagined. His presence radiated love, peace, and authority all at once. He wasn't standing there as a distant figure. He was approachable, yet awe-inspiring. I couldn't help myself. I moved closer to him, and as I did, I felt this overwhelming sense of gratitude. When I reached him, I didn't stand tall. I couldn't. The only thing I could do was fall to my hands and knees. I knelt before him, staring at his feet, unable to bring myself to look up at his face just yet. His feet were beautiful, scarred but beautiful. They were a reminder of what he had done for me, of the sacrifice he made so that I could be here in this place. Through tears, all I could say was, "You did this for me. You did this for me." At that moment, I knew that the only reason I was in heaven was because of what Jesus had done. It wasn't because of anything I had earned or achieved. It was purely his grace. As I knelt there, I felt his love wash over me. It was unlike anything I had ever known. His love wasn't just something he gave. It was who he was. Every part of his being radiated love, and it filled every corner of my soul. I realized that heaven wasn't just a place. It was being in the presence of Jesus. It wasn't about golden streets or pearly gates. It was about him. As I knelt there, staring at his feet, I felt waves of emotion washing over me. Gratitude, humility, awe. I didn't feel worthy to be in his presence, but at the same time, I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I couldn't stop repeating the same words. "You did this for me." It wasn't just a statement. It was a realization that hit me with the full force of its meaning. Everything I was experiencing, the peace, the joy, the love, it was all because of him. He had paid the ultimate price for me to be here. And as I knelt, I felt his hand gently rest on my shoulder. That single touch filled me with more love and assurance than I had ever known. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only moments, I found the courage to lift my eyes and look at him. When I saw his face, I was overwhelmed. He wasn't like any painting or image I had ever seen. His face was radiant, but not in a blinding way. It was more like a warm, welcoming light that drew you in. His eyes were what struck me the most. They were filled with so much love, compassion, and understanding that it felt like he could see straight into my soul. In his gaze, I felt completely known. Every mistake I had ever made, every flaw, every moment of doubt, it was all laid bare before him. But instead of judgment, I saw love. a love so deep and unconditional that it broke me in the best possible way. As I took in the scene, I noticed a multitude surrounding him. There were angels, majestic, awe-inspiring beings that radiated light and purity. But there were also people. I could tell they were the redeemed, those who had lived on earth and now stood in heaven. They were worshiping him, not because they had to, but because they couldn't help themselves. Their love and adoration for him poured out like a river, and it was contagious. I wanted to join them, to worship him with every part of my being. And so I did. What happened next was unlike anything I've ever experienced. The worship around Jesus turned into the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. It wasn't just music. It was alive. The voices of the angels and the redeemed blended together in perfect harmony, creating a song that resonated deep within me. It was a song of gratitude, of love, of adoration for the one who made it all possible. And the most amazing thing, I could feel that I was part of it. Even though I didn't open my mouth, my soul was singing along. After some time, Jesus turned his full attention to me. It was as if, in that moment, I was the only person in the universe. He smiled at me, a smile that radiated kindness and understanding, and said, "James, there is so much I want to show you." I felt like a child standing before a loving parent, eager to listen, to learn, to soak in every word he had to say. Jesus began to show me glimpses of my life, but from a perspective I had never seen before. He showed me moments where I had made a difference in the lives of others, moments I had completely forgotten or thought were insignificant. I saw myself counseling a young boy who was on the verge of giving up on life. At the time, I didn't think much of our conversation, but Jesus showed me how that one moment had rippled through the boy's life. Because of that conversation, the boy chose to stay in school, eventually graduate, and start a family of his own. It was humbling to see how God had used me in ways I didn't even realize. But then he also showed me the moments I had missed, times when I had been too busy or distracted to notice someone who needed help. He didn't show me these moments to make me feel guilty, but to teach me how important it is to be present and attentive to the people around me. Through it all, one message stood out above everything else: grace. Jesus made it clear that my place in heaven wasn't earned by the good I had done. It wasn't because of my job, my efforts, or my accomplishments. It was purely because of his grace. He reminded me that grace is a gift I didn't deserve, but one that he gave freely out of love. That realization brought me to tears. At one point, Jesus turned my attention toward the throne of God. Although I couldn't see the Father directly, I could feel his presence. It was overwhelming, a love so vast and infinite that it felt like the very air of heaven was saturated with it. It was in that moment that I realized something profound. The love of the Father wasn't just directed at me. It was for everyone. Every person who has ever lived, no matter their mistakes or failures, is loved by God with a love that never ends. After what felt like an eternity, Jesus told me that my time in heaven wasn't finished, but my work on earth wasn't done yet. "James," he said, "I'm sending you back, but not without purpose. Share what you've seen. Tell others about my love and grace. Let them know that heaven is real and that I am waiting for them." I didn't want to leave. Heaven was everything I had ever longed for, and being in his presence was the most fulfilling experience of my life. But I knew he was right. I had a mission to complete. The next thing I knew, I was back in the hospital bed. I could hear the beeping of machines and the voices of the doctors and nurses working to stabilize me. My body felt heavy and weak, but my spirit was alive and filled with a renewed sense of purpose. When I fully regained consciousness, Emily was by my side, tears streaming down her face. I told her everything about leaving my body, traveling to heaven, meeting Jesus, and the overwhelming love I had experienced. It wasn't an easy recovery, but every step of the way, I held on to the lessons Jesus had taught me. I share this story not to glorify my experience, but to point you to the one who made it possible, Jesus Christ. Heaven is real, His love is real, and His grace is available to everyone, no matter where you've been or what you've done. If this story has touched your heart, I encourage you to seek Him, pray, read His Word, and open your heart to the love and grace He offers. And if this testimony has inspired you, please share it with others. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below. Let's start a conversation about faith, hope, and the incredible reality of heaven. Thank you for listening, and may God bless you abundantly.